Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to September. Wow, this year has really flown by, hasn't it? I feel like the winds of change are upon us. I was putting this episode together as sitting in my front yard and listening to the breeze swooshing through the giant pine tree above my head and ringing the aspen leaves like little bells. And that wind just really made me feel this chill deep in my body for the first time in a really long time. So it really just feels like, the winds of change. I'm recording this on Friday because this Sunday, when I normally record, we're planning to throw a little party, and I needed the weekend to prepare for that a bit. My daughters wanted to have a fun summer party for the past couple of months and, have a kiddie pool and a bubble machine and watermelon and pink flamingo floaties and all of that stuff. And I thought she might forget about it because she's 5 and she moves from things quite quickly. But last week she got really sad that we had missed summer and that she wouldn't take the promise of a pumpkin patch or Halloween party in its place. So, I said, it's not over yet. And we blew up all the pool floaties and the inner tubes in the living room and started to make summer decorations for our summer forever party. And we went to Party City for paper plates, and their front display happened to be 50% off everything summer. So we added a bunch of boingy flamingo headbands and flower leis and colorful paper garlands. And now I'm getting really excited to have this last hurrah of summer on September 1st. But even though that cool wind is blowing in, we can still squeeze it out, that last few drops of summer. We invited some of her new kindergarten friends and some old preschool friends and neighbors and people from visiting out of town and family members. And I got a lot of smiles at the pink flamingo invitations that really are serving as a bittersweet reminder of the season's end. So I think it brought up a lot for a lot of people. And so as the cool wind blows in a change of seasons, we're definitely ready to squeeze out those last drops of summer before we settle into the mystery of what the transition to these darker months is going to bring. This episode today is called Trust the Mystery, and it's highlighting today's Virgo new moon in the gate of aloneness and liberation, followed by my birthday gate, gate 64, which is the gate of confusion or imagination. Both of the gates this week have a similar theme of kind of stripping the fat, letting the dust settle, and trusting in the infinite potential of the mystery. So let's get into it. This week's highlights are Monday, September 2nd. That's today, if you're listening when this first comes out. It's the new moon in Virgo in the gate of aloneness or liberation or resolve. And it's Labor Day. So happy Labor Day. In the human design and I Ching wheel, today and tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday, we're in gate 40. And then from Tuesday through next Monday, we move into gate 64, the gate of confusion. And then Sunday, September 8th, is my birthday. So, I like to have people on the podcast for their birthdays to talk to them a little bit about their season and their sun gate. And so today we get to dig into mine. It really was quite a process for me getting, really trying to suss out what to say about this gate of mine, 64. But I learned so much in the process of researching for this and just contemplating and sitting with this episode. So I hope you enjoy. The week's themes are simplifying life and trimming the excesses, setting intentions for health, wellness, and routine for the next 6 months, and meditations on imaginal selves and the potentials for the upcoming seasons of winter and fall. In the Wheel of the Year, we are in the medicine wheel direction of West now, which represents water and adulthood and emotionality. We're in the whooshing Taoist 5-element cycle of Earth, the pagan season of Lammas. We're heading towards Mabon, which is the fall equinox fairly soon. The zodiac season of Virgo from August 22nd to September 22nd. And the moon phase, new moon in Virgo. So let's get into the new moon to start out. The new moon before we transition into my birthday gate, gate 64. We are still in gate 40, the gate of aloneness, also known as liberation in the I Ching. So the moon is meeting up with the sun in the sign of the discerning harvest goddess, Virgo. And this year, the new moon in Virgo is in the gate of aloneness, like I just said. And every year, the new moon and the full moon each season will be in a different gate because that's how the cycles work. It's not going to be in the same gate, the same micro season every year. The new moon and full moon's degrees within a zodiac sign change every year, but every year the new moon in September is the new moon in Virgo, and the full moon is the sign opposite from that, full moon in Pisces, which is coming up in a couple weeks. So, but this year, we're in the human design gate of aloneness, and I think it's a really interesting gate to zone in on for this new moon energy, to really get a taste of what the new moon's specific energy has to give us. I did talk about this gate a bit in last week's episode, and it is the hexagram thunder over water in the I Ching. It's the gate of going inward, like the tarot's Hermit card, which is a Virgo symbol that really resonates with this gate's energy. It's the gate of feeling the exhaustion of the activity of the summer months, and the gate of pruning the excesses so that you can focus on your inner resolve and your inner connection to the divine. In the I Ching, this new moon's gate of aloneness is known as liberation, and in the gene keys, the gift and city level are known as resolve and divine will. So liberation, resolve, divine will, aloneness. Take a moment to kind of think about all of those words, and those are going to be meditations for this new moon on Monday, today. So by taking the assignment of this micro season of aloneness, which highlights this new moon and continues through tomorrow, Tuesday, we're able to find our inner resolve, our connection to the divine, and feel liberated from having to do it all or be it all. When we surrender some of our endless activity that we really were bustling through over the spring and summer, we can now settle into the changing season with a renewed sense of balance, kind of like the fresh air after a thunderstorm has settled. It's just a huge storm overhead and then just this release of pressure that the thunderstorm has cleared. So that's really what this new moon's energy is all about. In Virgo, there's a quote by Jungian analyst Esther Harding, who wrote about Virgo that really struck me in relation to this new moon. It says, she is essentially one in herself. Her divine power does not depend on relation to a husband or a god, and thus her actions are not dependent on the need to conciliate such a one or to accord with his qualities and attitudes, for she bears her divinity in her own right. So Virgo, I've mentioned this in a couple of the past episodes, but the true meaning of Virgo, rather than being pure or chaste or one who hasn't had sex, is actually about being kind of an unmarried one, or one who is not connected to, expectations from a larger social structure necessarily, but one unto herself, a very witchy kind of gate. And last week we began Virgo season in the gate of sexuality, which I see as really showing us how much Virgo is connected to intimacy with the world around her, not just to other people, but to the plants of the harvest and to the community, and starting to see who and what is part of the larger web of interrelations. Before these next couple of gates go more into the internal. And again, like I mentioned last week, Virgo being a mutable sign has gates that kind of fluctuate between the other and the self, really going very deep inward and then coming back out to the other. So the gate of sexuality that started us out was kind of arising after, a very hot and self-expressed and heartfelt end of summer in Leo season. We were feeling ourselves, right? I've talked to a lot of people who have listened to the podcast. A friend just left a voice memo that was like, I've never really paid too much attention to astrology or any of these kind of seasonal mythologies, but I really did feel that as Leo season came, I wanted to be more social. I wanted to be more outward. I wanted to be, more expressive. And now when Virgo season hits, there's a certain deepening and intimacy with other people that comes from that self-expressedness throughout the summer. So the first gate of Virgo season, the gate of sexuality, allowed us to connect that internal heat that we generated over the summer and then begin to share it with those around us through intimate exchanges and dissolving of boundaries between the self and the other. And then right after that first gate of intimacy and sexuality and getting intimate with our surroundings, we turn inward with gate 40 to discern what's really important and to align with a higher purpose that will guide us through the rest of fall and winter. And that's what the gate of aloneness and the manifestations of this new moon in Virgo are bringing about. It's really trimming the fat of summer and listening deeply to our inner knowing. And it's kind of also about not really adding any more activity to our lives at this point, but instead deciding what to focus in on and what to let go of. In this spring, my partner and I planted a little stick of a peach tree to mark a grave for my in-laws' peachy orange cat who passed away. And to my surprise, this year there was a bounty of little peaches fruiting already that kind of made the thin trunk of the tree bend over with their weight. And it's right out my kitchen window, and I'm just looking out and seeing this tree, this baby tree, just heavy with peaches. And I always like to think about the plants that are in my view during the season just as a metaphor and a reminder. And these peaches, the bounty of these peaches that I've seen around town as well as in my backyard, I'm looking at them and noticing that with stone fruit like that, some of the peaches are ready to pick and eat and enjoy, and then others are being eaten by birds, and others are falling to the ground, maybe after being pecked by a bird. And kind of rejoining the soil. So we can be reminded by the peach tree in Virgo season that not all fruits are for our taking and for our enjoyment. And just remembering that some must be reserved for others. There is a bounty in harvest season, like for some for our animal neighbors and birds. And then others must fall to the earth and return to the ground as compost. And we need to let certain fruits of the summer die during this season. And so this gate of aloneness, this gate of resolve is really about noticing which fruits want to be picked and want to be emphasized and want to be enjoyed, which fruits want to be given to others, and which fruits want to return to the earth and provide nutrients in the soil for the next season. So this new moon, the season of death is not yet imminent, but in Virgo season, we're starting to recognize that we have to conserve some of our energy and share some of our bounty and let the parts of life that want to die off. In my world, gate 40 has really shown up in a pretty strong way. The gate of intimacy earlier last week definitely showed up as far as just house projects and connecting on future visions and plans with my partner and my family. But then gate 40 hit, and it just turned into kind of like, okay, decluttering time. It's a very Virgo, just getting rid of a lot of stuff in the house. And then also at the end of last week, there was a celebration called the burning of Zozobra, which I'll talk a little bit about here because it also felt very resonant with Gate 40's liberation from excess, and the feeling that we can only really find that within ourselves, but knowing very internally what we want to let go of and what we want to hold on to. So yeah, I was very tapped into that energy last week, and over the weekend, I started cleaning out and organizing my messy closet and also my collection. I have a whole room of art supplies that I have moved around with me in boxes since I was in college, like about 20 years ago. They've just kind of, collage materials and paints and sequins, or like whatever. I've just never been able to throw away art supplies. So this past week, I felt the Virgoan power of being able to finally let go of some things, to release them back into the compost. And I took several bags of clothes to the thrift store. I sent them away. I'm using a thrift store that's online called ThreadUp, where they will recycle clothes in an appropriate way for you, and you can get a credit towards their online thrift shop. So I decided to try that out. But I did that, and I tossed out lots of tubes of dried up paint that had been sitting around and recycled some stacks of old papers. And I kind of went into this thinking that I would clear out space to be able to go replace the supplies or maybe buy new clothes. And I almost bought new clothes first, and then I was like, well, depending on what I get, then I can decide what to get rid of after. But that's not how that works. That's not how this season works. You kind of have to get rid of the things first, and then whatever is still alive and thriving and focused on will have more space to take up as we focus inward, focus our energies. So I did that. I got rid of lots of things, and once I got to the end of that process in decluttering and cleaning, I was able to see what I already had in a new light and realize I don't really need to go shopping. I don't really need to go get more supplies. I have plenty, and it actually served to focus my energy towards like new outfits and also what type of art I want to create based on reinvigorating what I already had. So there's a certain beauty in that in both realms. In my closet, I realized that even after giving bags away, I still like a lot of the stuff that I have, and I saw new like outfit combinations that felt exciting that I can take into the fall, and noticed certain items that might make great hand-me-down gifts to specific people in my life. And in my art room, there was like this process of taking note of what I had and then streamlining it. So then I was able to set up stations for different kinds of art making. So I got a sewing spot set up and a table spot with some my X-Acto knives for collage and drawing, and then an easel area with the paints needed nearby. And so everything has its place now. And it just required getting rid of things to see that. There's like this analysis and discernment and releasing energy of Virgo season. And in Gate 40's gift of resolve, it allowed me to feel kind of resolved and intentional and purposeful as I move forward without as much excess to consider and get bogged down by. So that was my decluttering Virgo. I mean, just that's right on the nose, right, with the Virgo stereotypes. But gosh, it feels good, especially for me. I just, Virgo, Sun, and Mercury, I just really got into it. And then in the same vein, last Friday, there was a special celebration that's really special for me and also for the entire city of Santa Fe. And it was the 100th anniversary burning of Zozobra, which is a 50-foot tall puppet known as Old Man Gloom. And it's a tradition that began in 1924, 100 years ago, when the artist Will Schuster burned the first version of Old Man Gloom in his backyard. And I've always really loved Zozobra because it's a Santa Fe, very specific to Santa Fe tradition. I remember when I moved to the Bay Area, I would tell people about that, and everyone was like, "Oh, is that like Burning Man? That sounds like Burning Man." And I was like, "No, I hate Burning Man. It's not Burning Man." But then I started going to Burning Man and realized that I like Burning Man in a completely different way, but a similar cathartic, releasing the extra pent-up energy of late summer before diving into the seriousness of fall. Kind of how I loved Mardi Gras living in New Orleans, as well as this kind of pre-Lenten celebration of really getting it all out, before Lent, before really cutting off the fat for that season. So I've always enjoyed this kind of celebration. But Zozobra is, it kind of was it's a decluttering ceremony, like a psychic decluttering is the way I see it. Old Man Gloom allows us to put our gloom into him, into this big, moaning, groaning giant puppet. You can write it on a piece of paper at the mall and actually stuff your gloom and your grief and your despair and any negative things that you're holding from the past year and put them into him to be burned away. Or you can do it from your heart, kind of send out. If you don't make it to the mall to write it in a piece of paper, it's still about gathering in a crowd and sending your grief and your pain into this effigy that is then burned away. And there's a certain release from that process. So it's definitely, a psychic rather than material decluttering, but feels very appropriate for this Virgo season and this gate of aloneness. He's like this animatronic puppet, or marionette, not animatronic, I'm wrong. A huge marionette his arms move and he's kind of oftentimes flipping off the audience. He has these big, saucer hubcap eyes and a bow tie with 3 buttons and some suspenders and this long white cloak, and it's just this really very iconic Santa Fe image that has just gotten to be such a huge celebration. When I was young, it was maybe 5,000 people in a field, and now it's up to 60,000 plus. So definitely a scene. It's a whole thing. People are craving this type of catharsis, I think. But you can write down your gloom, and it's just this huge display where the gloom and sadness of the whole populace, whoever's there, kind of goes up in smoke along with Zozobra, chanting burn him," and really getting your rage out. Zozobra is super special for me because back in 1983, I was born on the day that Zozobra was being burned, and my parents lived at a rental house next to the park where the celebration happens, Fort Marcy Park in Santa Fe. So they lived, less than a block away from there. And my parents had been coming to Santa Fe for a while, but they were fairly new to Santa Fe at that point, and they didn't know much about Zozobra. But as they brought me home from the hospital, they heard the loud groans and moans and the firework bangs and of the burning effigy. And so ever since then, Zozobra's really felt like my own personal New Year celebration. Growing up, I really never got my birthday to myself, definitely my birthday weekend, but instead I got to share a wild fiesta with the entire city of Santa Fe as we all shouted "Que viva la fiesta" and "burn him," and the puppet, just gets increasingly agitated and louder and louder as the celebration goes on before a fire dancer lights him on fire and fireworks go off, and it's crazy. It's so fun. And it always felt really so good to be able to get out into a crowd and yell and scream and let out whatever feels stuck in our bodies and in our psyches with a group of people. And then after a lot of drama and suspense and kind of this push-pull of him not wanting to go, those worries and angers and fears are burned away in a cloud of smoke. And when I left Santa Fe when I was 18 and moved around to New Orleans and San Francisco and Brazil, I always took a little Zozobra with me and would burn a mini effigy, whether it was like a teeny paper towel roll size. Or when my 30th birthday in San Francisco, my friends had a party where we burned probably like a 10-foot one in the backyard, and everybody got really into it and made him and then put all of their gloom into him. And I saw this tradition get carried outside of Santa Fe a little bit. So it was always really fun to bring that along. Growing up, Zozobra happened on my birthday week, which was the weekend after Labor Day. And it was a part of Santa Fe's historical Fiestas de Santa Fe. And that was when it was done on my birthday week, it was in the Gate of Confusion, Gate 64, which is known as Imagination in the Gene Keys, which feels appropriate because it's definitely quite an imaginative, artist-fueled celebration. But several years ago, they moved Zozobra to happen a week earlier each year. And so Zozobra this year happened during the sun's transit through Gate 40. And again, this energy is all about releasing and liberating ourselves from excesses and overwhelm and just the too muchness that's collected over the past spring and summer. And it allows us to kind of find inner resolve as we move forward. So, que viva Zozobra. I'll post some pictures on the Astrosomatic Substack, where you can always find a transcript of this episode. And you can I'll post a link to a video as well, so you can get a sense of Zozobra. My 5-year-old was a little bit afraid. We actually went to a Zozobra opera this year. The music was written by a friend of friends, and within the first 10 minutes, she got really freaked out about the story behind Zozobra. So we left and ran around downtown instead. So it's definitely can feel a little bit scary, but I just kept emphasizing to her that, it's a great opportunity to burn our gloom away, to just have an opportunity, after so much happens, to not set a resolution. It's not like a New Year's resolution, but it's really just a release to make space for what wants to grow, what wants to be focused on through the upcoming seasons. So this new moon today, Monday, is in the same gate, and new moons are generally just wonderful times for resetting and manifesting and setting intentions for the upcoming lunar cycle for the next month. And it's also a good time to set intentions for the next 6 months when the corresponding full moon occurs. So 6 months from now we'll be in Pisces season, and the full moon will be in Virgo, which will also be a lunar eclipse. So that makes this new moon today all the more powerful for bringing changes and upgrades into your life and shedding things that are not serving you. And the best way to do that for this full moon specifically is to tap into Virgo's organizing, analyzing, discerning qualities, and also Virgo's kind of connection to service, connection to the other. It's definitely time to eat some of those juicy peaches and give some peaches to the birds and to your neighbors, and let some of those peaches rot on the ground, knowing that they're not going to waste, but they're feeding the soil and sowing the seeds for next year's harvest. So yeah, burning of Zozobra, the summer forever party, and the manifesting new moon. Check, check, check. Got all those, and it's only Monday. It's been a busy past week, and now it's my birthday week up ahead. I don't have too much planned leading up to my birthday, but then I'm going to be going on a little trip to Oregon from next Saturday to the following week to see my grandmother, and who's 98, and to go to my cousin's wedding and see some other family members and get a taste of the Pacific Ocean, which I need to do at least once a year. So I'm looking forward to that birthday celebration. During that time, during this upcoming week until next Monday, so tomorrow, Tuesday the 3rd, through next Monday the 9th, the sun is going to be in gate 64, which is my sun gate, and the gate that the sun was transiting through when I was born. And it's known as the Gate of Confusion, not yet a cross in the I Ching. And in the Gene Keys, its gift and city are imagination and illumination. So stay tuned, and maybe this next little bit of the podcast will illuminate a little bit more about me and why I do what I do, like why I'm doing this podcast. It kind of just makes a lot of sense when I looked at this gate. I was like, oh yeah, okay, cycles. Yep, that makes sense. So anyway, gate 64, confusion, imagination, illumination. Happy birthday to me. In addition to all the decluttering, planting, writing, and podcasting and partying that I did last week, I also made some time for a few yoga classes, which was thanks to procrastinating on my class pass that's about to expire. It's made me go a lot, and it's gotten me really back into yoga, which feels so good. And one of the classes that I went to was a beautiful class with a teacher I really liked named Abby, and it was all about setting intentions of gratitude, as many yoga classes are. But the way that this was executed was so beautiful. And as I flowed through my vinyasa, I kept meeting up face to face with the person in front of me's water bottle. It was just right there at the back of her mat. So I would kind of come through a chaturanga and my face would come up to this water bottle, and there was a sticker on it that had the night sky above some saguaro cacti, and it said, "Trust the mystery." And it felt like a message to me as I was also doing some contemplations on gate 64, trusting the mystery. And then another class I did was a yin class where we held each posture for 10 minutes or more, kind of some supine twists, and just different really juicy poses, but holding them for a long time. And so rather than holding an active pose with muscle and strength, the teacher encouraged us to let gravity and time do the work in these poses. And throughout the class is just beautiful kind of ambient music, and I put, a face mask over my eyes, and she just kept saying, release, relax, let gravity and time do the work. And that, just hearing that and having the permission to just not be putting any effort, but allow gravity and time to do the work, felt really nice at that moment. And when I looked at both of these, trust the mystery and let gravity and time do the work and relax into it, I really saw those come up as themes of gate 64, which is this week where the energy is leading us from confusion to illumination through the path of imagination. After a lot of contemplations on my birthday gate, I've really come to love it and resonate with it in a big way. But it hasn't been an easy path. I think the word confusion, just having that there, it's really, being confused is kind of like one of the worst things to be in our society. I feel like it just comes with a really negative connotation to it. So I've had my work to do with this gate, and I'll start there kind of talking about confusion and my struggle with that throughout the years, because it started out where I remember picking up a book on a friend's coffee table, in college in my 20s, and it was called The Secret Language of Birthdays. It's a book by Gary Goldschneider. And so I flipped through the pages. You've probably seen this book. It's a big blue coffee table book. He's also written one about relationships, and they're very popular. I think it was published in the 90s. So it's been kind of just around various places where I've been. And so I remember seeing it for the first time and flipping through the pages. This was way before I was into astrology, beyond, horoscopes in the newspaper or whatever. But I found, my birth week, September 3rd to 10th. And it was the week of the Enigma. And so I thought, oh man, Enigma, that does not sound fun. That sounds confusing. And then here I am years later looking into human design and the I Ching and finding that my birthday is in the gate of confusion too. So damn, I would love to have something else, It was a little bit of a pain point. So in my birthday week chapter of The Secret Language of Birthdays, Goldschneider writes, those born during the week of Enigma, September 3rd to 10th, are not always easy to figure out, Puzzling and often paradoxical, their remarks and attitudes can leave one wondering what they actually meant. Their emotional depth is belied by a matter-of-fact exterior and a reliance on intellect. Dealing with their own emotional problems is usually their greatest personal challenge, one for which they are not always well equipped. This is complicated by the fact that they are more needful than most for the approval of others. Extremely valuable to any group or organization, they can become the mainstay of demanding projects and rarely, if ever, quit before the job is completed. During the week of the Enigma, we would all do well to go inside and deal with our own personal problems. By confronting our internal demons, we will be in a better position to function well in our daily lives and to help others, particularly friends and family members. Aiming for transparency should be a particular goal to strive for during this week, which means being emotionally honest with those close to us. Tendencies to be secretive and withdrawn should be opposed in favor of sharing and openness. Taking the time to explain ourselves to those who do not understand will be a good first step now. So that week, September 3rd to 10th, that would actually be, the week of aloneness into the week of confusion. So that kind of resonates, that kind of tracks. I also, he doesn't just go into the weeks in this book, he goes into the days as well. So there's one entry for each day. And so I remember flipping to my birthday page and I found the day of the puzzling purist. And that was a total facepalm moment for me. Because I was like, what? Both Enigma and Puzzling Purist? Like, really? Okay. So that entry says, the enigmatic individuals born on September 8th are by no means easy to figure out. In their own minds, they are interested in cleaning up shop, straightening things out, and generally improving the lot of their family, social, or national group. Whether their efforts turn out well or badly in the end, there is no denying that September 8th people impact greatly on their environment. Those born on this day are often misunderstood by others, not least because they tend to be secretive. They are supreme actors on the stage of life, capable of playing many parts, but usually content to play just one very well. Most September 8th people see the world in terms of black and white. Their chosen role is often as protector of the faith against enemies of family, state, party, or church. Therefore, it's extremely important that those born on this day spend time examining their values to see if they are pure as they believe. September 8th people generally like to be at the very head of their group, whether public or private. Politics in particular may hold an attraction for them, and even if they do not take an active leadership role socially, they usually have a marked interest in the crucial issues of their times. Their views on these subjects may not be particularly tolerant. Most often, they're in favor of upholding the status quo and opposed to all ill-considered or undermining forms of change. Those born on this day may not be easy people to get along with, per se. They do not, however, depend on the opinions of others, but firmly hold their own course, knowing in their hearts that they do what is best for all. So, wow, that's a lot. And for those of you who know me, you can probably see some things in there that resonate. Some of it feels pretty harsh. Some of it feels maybe true. I think that this book of personography, I think it's called Personography, he takes the certain numerology of the day and the tarot card number of the day and the astrology of the season, and has worked with a lot of individuals to formulate this. But I think there's certainly truths within that text that are both harsh and empowering, but I also kind of see that the tone of writing in this popular book is a bit kind of dictatorial and inflexible and labeling, which I think can be really dangerous when we look at systems of personality. And I know I'm talking about a lot of these different systems of personality experimentation, but I definitely prefer the I Ching and depth astrology that goes back into the history of the myths of astrology, and the gene keys, because they have this more openness to interpretation and their methodology oftentimes. And so this book, I always took it with a grain of salt, but I think that once things are once some things are said or read, they can't really be unsaid. And so there certainly had some things that really stuck with me about, being an enigma and puzzling and confusion, and they've kind of haunted me. So, I think in certain ways I've held on to some of the stuff in there that's given me like a negative self-image in some ways. And so I've been really enjoying looking at some other interpretations, which I'm going to go into here in a minute, that seem a lot more just open-ended and open-minded. But, I'm also open to criticism as much as it says I'm not in here. And I'd love to hear what sticks out if you know me. It's just always interesting to be presented with something and say, is that me? Do I resonate with that? Do I not? And yeah, puzzling. I'm okay with that. I think I'm curious how, if you've read this book, if you've seen it on a coffee table and picked it up for your birthday, I'm curious if you have resonated with yours. And his name's Goldschneider, and I think I'm curious if there are correspondences between the birthday book entries and the weeks and the days and the gates of the I Ching and human design. Because for this one, it's very clear, like the enigma, the confusion, they're very lined up. So I would be very curious to dive into that, and maybe that's a whole nother season of this podcast. But for now, back to the I Ching. So as I get older, beyond that book and self-judgment, which is very much a Virgo trait, I've really learned to embrace my sun in gate 64 and see beyond its kind of like negative, enigmatic qualities. When I learn more deeply about the I Ching and its interpretations through human design and the gene keys, I have really been able to clear up some of the personal insecurities that the secret language of birthdays really were placed upon me all those years ago. And so when you look at gate 64 this week, it is really interesting because it starts to like really bring up the complexity and the completeness of the I Ching as a book itself. So the I Ching has 64 hexagrams, and so hexagram 64 is the last hexagram of the I Ching. It's the final one. And when I found that out, like my sun gate is the final one, I was like, that's interesting. What does that mean? And so like in the I Ching, the first hexagram, number 1, is known as heaven over heaven, or the creative, and it's made up of 6 solid yang lines. And the second hexagram is known as earth over earth, and it's made up of 6 broken or yin lines. So from heaven and earth, these completely yang and completely yin symbolisms, all of the other 62 hexagrams are born. And it's pretty cool because in the I Ching, the way I understand it, hexagrams 1 through 61 are all of the chapters of the Book of Life. All of these different manifestations of yin and yang combinations. And then hexagram 62 is known as the gate of details. And if you're a longtime listener, you might remember that we discussed gate 62 back in Cancer season around July 15th with my partner Jackson, because it's his sun gate. So you can look back to that episode if you want to learn more. But hexagram 62 is an interesting one in of itself because it is like the glossary at the end of the book. So 1 through 61 are all of the different chapters of life's complexity and spirituality and connection with the greater universe. And then 62 is like, okay, cool, here we are, we got it all. We're going to list it out in detailed glossary and really just kind of bring it all together and distill it into its essence. And then hexagram 63 and 64 are like the epilogue to the book, the chapters that come after the glossary. Maybe actually it's more accurate to say that hexagram 63 is the epilogue to the book, and then hexagram 64 is almost like the prologue to the next book, the following book, or the next cycle of time. And so it seemed very fitting that 64 would be this kind of enigmatic icing on the cake after the whole book has been completed and you've read the glossary and then also read the epilogue. And then it's like, oh, but there's still more. There's something next. And so that really felt appropriate for just the work that I'm doing here with thinking about the world in cycles and looking into different traditions that have believed this way. It's not radical, but it's something that people have done for all of human history, is looking at time as a cycle. And so being with my sun gate, they say in human design that the sun gate represents like 60% or 70% rather of your personality. And there's a lot of other planetary energies that are in other gates, and the north node, the south node, the moon. But there's also just a lot of emphasis on the sun being, the center of gravity, the center of our solar system, just a huge amount of energy, and also the seasonal resonance. And so thinking about 64 was pretty spiritual, just to even think about it in that way of like, where does this lie within the Book of Changes? It's the end and the beginning. It's the cusp between one cycle and a next. It's this point of revolution. So that helped me embrace it a little bit more than being like, oh, it's just hella confusing and hard to understand and hard to get along with. So hooray for different languaging and different systems. So in the I Ching, hexagram 64 is known as not yet a cross, or before completion, or nearing completion. Those are all different interpretations of the gate of the hexagram. And so all of those suggest that the ever-spinning wheel of life never reaches a final conclusion. And the two trigrams that make up the hexagram are fire over water, which visually looks like alternating solid and broken lines, yin and yang lines. So it goes solid, broken, solid, broken, solid, broken. And then the previous gate, gate 63, is located directly across the wheel from gate 64 in Pisces. So we have Virgo gate 64, Pisces gate 63, right across the wheel. And it is known, gate 63 is known as completion. And so it goes completion and then before completion. So no wonder it feels confusing. That's already confusing, right? But gate 63 is represented by the reverse trigrams. So it's not water over fire, or it's not fire over water, but it's water over fire. And it also looks like alternating solid and broken lines, but in the reverse order of gate 64. So it's broken first, then solid, broken, solid, broken, solid. And these are the only two hexagrams that have alternating yin and yang, that have no two broken or solid lines in a row. And so that means that there's like a certain epilogue or prologue to it. They're not part of the sequence of energies, right? It's kind of at the end is where they're all intermixed together. At the beginning is where they're completely separate apart. So super fascinating to just look at the symbolism of it. But both 63 and 64 are fire and water elements, which indicates cooking and integration and transformation. So perfect for the end of a wheel. Water over fire, gate 63, indicates the completion of a cycle. And it's known as completion. So it's like the fire under water means that the water is coming to a boil and kind of cooking the whole thing. after the detailed glossary of all the parts being broken apart, it's like, oh, let's merge it together and cook it and boil it. In human design, gate 63 is known as doubt, which indicates the doubt and questioning that naturally arises after we finish a book and read through the glossary. And then we get there and we're like, is that it? Is that everything? So they say that those with gate 63 in their charts have the fuel to move through this uncertainty to get to completion. So it's doubt and completion. And then comes 64, the final hexagram. So after the gate of completion, we reach before completion. And this is inherently confusing just by the nature of our linear minds or storytelling minds. We want to reach a finality or find some closure, and then we got to go backwards to before completion. So it's begging the question, like, do we need to find that conclusion? Is that even real? Fire over water, unlike water over fire, is not boiling. It's not cooking, because fire by its nature reaches upward with its flames, and water by its nature draws downward with gravity. So just when we think we're finished or contained or cooked, we reach the final hexagram, where we're shown the true nature of the world, which is expansion. And it's very evocative of physics, the physical nature of the universe, the ever-expanding universe, where up keeps going up and down keeps going down, onward and onward forever, right? The Big Bang started as a single point and then has been expanding and expanding outward ever since. So the image of fire moving upward kind of portrays how you could lose your sense of connectivity to a certain situation and just always be looking up to the skies to figure things out. And water is releasing its profound wisdom down below. So with this polarity between water going down and fire rising up, we are in the middle of that. Kind of can feel confusing, but it can also help us to observe how life is speaking to us from the below and from above. And in the Gene Keys, the shadow of gate 64 is confusion, the gift is imagination, and the city is illumination. So this gate reminds us that a confusion is not a state to be avoided, but instead embraced as an integral first step on the path toward making discoveries through our imaginations, and thus gaining new insights and illuminating the expansion of the universe and also the expansion of our consciousness. Trusting the mystery encourages us to stay in the energy of possibility and curiosity and imagination without trying to force clarity prematurely. From onlineclarity.co that writes about the I Ching, there's a quote kind of that goes into it that I thought was pretty great. That talks about hexagram 64 being called not yet a cross and what that means. So it's before completion or not yet a cross. And the gate is the embodiment of incompletion and imperfection, an ellipsis in hexagram form. It's a very large-scale, oracle-sized joke about our expectations of tidiness and order. The original Chinese character shows a small fox crossing a frozen lake. And the oracle of the I Ching says, not yet across, creating success. The small fox, almost across, soaks its tail. No direction bears fruit. So there is, foxes in Chinese culture are kind of often seen crossing icy ponds and lakes with their ears very attuned to the cracking of the ice and being very kind of cautious and careful about the crossing of a lake or a frozen river. And there's plenty of reports of foxes who get stuck or fall in or are frozen into solid ice along rivers. And there's also plenty of folk tales of foxes and other animals trying to fish through ice holes with their tails and getting stuck that way. And the thing about this image here is that if a fox, when crossing a frozen body of water gets his tail wet. And I also like that imagery because a fox is like fire. The fox is red and kind of evokes fire, and then the water is down below. So if the fox gets its tail wet in that water, it'll be weighted down and drag along the ice where it may freeze and hold him fast. So at that point, no direction will bear fruit. So crossing this lake or this river comes with real risk, and it's about being almost there, almost to completion, and still getting stuck if you kind of lose focus and don't continue to the end. And it says you want to be very, very sure of the state of the ice before you commit to yourself, and you need to keep your ears pricked as you make your way across. It says one of these cases where no direction bears fruit could have a double meaning. So if you get caught by the tail, you can pull in any direction and won't get free. But if you moved without a set direction, always responding to circumstances, perhaps having no direction would bear fruit in a successful crossing. So this is a gate that is about not having direction and leaning into trusting the mystery and not trying to solve or fix everything. Because if you're just actually being responsive to the current conditions of the moment, you will find yourself making your way across towards the next cycle. And this continues to say, just as hidden sadness resides in the heart of true euphoria, and just as seeds of amazing achievement can sprout from a cauldron of adversity, no end is ever really complete without a new beginning stirring inside it. I really love that. We may divide life into categories to understand and manage it, but experience itself is seamless. The Tao's 64-spoked timeless wheel of change is ready to spin onward, ever evolving, ever staying the same. 63 marks the end of the balancing act, and 64 marks the beginning of the next. The last line of 63 show how easily what is complete may fall back into being incomplete if one is not guarded at the end. This is like the young fox nearly making it across, only get the tail wet at the end. So it's interesting to me that this gate falls in Virgo season. In some ways, it seems a lot more Piscean to me, with its ethereal, nonlinear, expansive nature. But a couple of the lessons that are found within this gate are so Virgo, and I'll talk about them. First, it hones in on one of Virgo's main character traits that it's kind of just a given character trait for Virgo, which is discernment and differentiation. Another hexagram I Ching interpretation for this gate says, "Fire dwells above water, not yet across. A noble one carefully differentiates between beings, so each finds its place." Differentiating means distinguishing between, discriminating, clarifying, and hence managing, governing. And here she differentiates carefully, a character that includes the heart radical. The qualities of water, emotional flow, and depth are engaged too. What does it mean to differentiate between beings with emotional care? I think Balkin put it exceptionally well. This is Jack Balkin from The Laws of Change, who says, "You have to understand the elements of the situation and all the forces at your disposal. You have to get people working together rather than against each other. And you have to get all your resources working together in sync rather than randomly and haphazardly." So, yeah, part of Gate 64 is really about, finding yourself in the middle of a frozen lake, kind of in no man's land almost, where there is danger because we're outside of the realm of knowing, but then learning how to differentiate between the steps that you take. The fox is using those big ears to listen for cracks in the ice and differentiate carefully, emotionally carefully, caring about the situation, caring about making it across so much that they'll get there. And that's also such a Virgo trait, is service to the whole and care for the whole process. And it also, this gate reminds me of Virgo because it reminds me of the immense potential that the sign of Virgo in its original meaning encompasses. So in the original ancient Greek, Virgo doesn't mean virgin in the sense of pure and chaste, as I mentioned earlier, but it's more a virgin in the sense of one into herself, self-contained, and it's kind of in the sense of a virgin forest. So Marion Woodman wrote in The Crown of Age that the virgin is the beingness in us, the I am, one in herself. Use the word as you would the word virgin forest, where the forest is untrammeled. There's nothing foreign in it. It's clear to be itself, but it is full of all kinds of seeds, so that there is immense potential. So drawing on this immense potentiality of Virgo and kind of the magical quality of this sign, I think there's another apt metaphor for gate 64 that is that part of the life cycle of a butterfly when the caterpillar is in the chrysalis. You know, it's lived its whole life, born, a little caterpillar, grows, eats a bunch of food, turns into a cocoon, chrysalis, and then completely dissolves into goo inside the chrysalis. Probably all heard this story by now. It's a very well-loved metaphor for our society right now and transformation and metamorphosis. But it's the idea that the caterpillar, completely turns into that primordial goo, and then some of its cells, which are known as imaginal cells, transform it into a completely new animal, the butterfly. And this story is beautifully told by the evolutionary biologist Elizabeth Satori. She says, a caterpillar can eat up to 300 times its own weight in a day, devastating many plants in the process, continuing to eat until it is so bloated that it hangs itself up and goes to sleep, its skin hardening into a chrysalis. Then, within the chrysalis, within the body of the dormant caterpillar, a new and very different kind of creature, the butterfly, starts to form. This confused biologists for a long time. How could a different genome plan exist within the caterpillar to form a different creature? They knew that metamorphosis occurs in a number of insect species, but it was not known until quite recently that nature did a lot of mixing and matching of very different genome and protein configurations in early evolutionary times. Cells within the butterfly genome were held as disc-like aggregates of stem cells that biologists call imaginal cells, hidden away inside the caterpillar all its life, remaining underdeveloped or undeveloped until the crisis of overeating, fatigue, and breakdown allows them to develop, gradually replacing the caterpillar with a butterfly. So, overeating, fatigue, breakdown, confusion, and then, boom, that's where imagination lies. Such metamorphosis makes a good metaphor for the great changes globalization and the sense of world transformation is bringing about, as Nori Huddle first used in her beautiful book, Butterfly. Our bloated old system is rapidly becoming defunct, while the vision of a new and very different society, long held by many imaginal cell humans who dreamt of a better world, is now emerging like a butterfly, representing our solutions to the crises of predation, overconsumption, and breakdown in a new way of living lightly on Earth, and of seeing our human society not in the metaphors and models of mechanism as a well-oiled social machinery, but in those of evolving, self-organizing, and intelligent living organism. If you want a butterfly world, don't step on the caterpillar, but join forces with other imaginal cells to build a better future for all. So I loved that telling. And it really reminds me of Gate 64's energy, just the imaginal cells, these dormant things within the goo that are known, but that are not quite ready until they're ready. And working with Gate 64 this week, for all of you, this is my life's work, kind of, but for everybody, we're going through this energy this week. And so for this week, or if you have Gate 64 active in your charts, I've read that it's a time when we get huge downloads of kind of chunks of information, maybe coming from that fire above, the ever-expanding fire above, and that ever ever deepening water below, there's this kind of channel created where we can receive huge downloads of clarity and information. But oftentimes with so much raw information that's like bringing in the past and the future and the up and the down, there's a certain pressure to make sense of these big chunks of information as quickly as possible. And so that could definitely be the energy of this week. Once we, in the gate of aloneness, early in the week in this new moon, kind of strip away the fat and find resolve about what's important for us, we're kind of clearing that space for perhaps a new download to come through, something that is poignant and resonant about what your future holds, what the next few months hold, what the next cycle holds. And so with this energy, there's definitely a particular emphasis on trying to make sense of and find meaning in the past, as well as a pressure to know how things are going to work out or unfold in the future. And for me, with this gate prominent in my chart, I definitely see this coming up in my life in a couple ways. Like, first, I do always kind of want to know how everything's going to work out, and I will ask a lot of questions to, the chagrin of some people around me, but I want to know. I just have a insatiable quest for knowing more and figuring it out and solving things for better or for worse. But another piece that comes up in my life is like the big download piece, the channeling of this ever expansive energy and a certain optimism that I have about just, there's always a new potential, there's always a new possibility. And sometimes in the middle of the night, I'll get these big epiphanies and downloads. And I have, since I was a really little kid, whether it's in a dream state when I'm sleeping, and that wakes me up, or whether it's I'm woken up and then suddenly have this insight, that's when I come up with all of my art ideas and just all of the ideas that I've executed over time. But sometimes I can't sleep again because I want to see all of the puzzle pieces coming together, and it can be insomnia inducing. And sometimes it's just too much. It's like too much, and it's not figure outable, especially in that moment. And so I'm learning over time to kind of stop trying to figure it out right away and just to give it that time and gravity, as my yoga teacher said earlier last week, just time and gravity. Let them do the work and don't necessarily try to effort towards figuring it out. There's a quote by Cullen Hightower that kind of sums it up that says, "We sometimes get all the information, but we refuse to get the message." And the big lesson there, which I'm continually trying to implement in my life, is to take this into consideration, that we are always on the threshold of change, and how we approach it will determine our success. Embarking on a journey from confusion to clarity demands understanding, patience, and a focused mind. Since nothing can reach completion, the trend moves towards the opposite condition, renewal or regeneration. And these are words that I just love, and I feel like they're coming into the forefront in our society. Regenerative agriculture, regenerative business, renewal, right? So it's not like, okay, we're going to reach the top and then suddenly it's all going to be figured out, but it's more so this new phenomenon of looking at our systems as cycles and looking at them as there's times for renewal, where life reveals an enormous power to sustain and strengthen the creatures who would follow its ways, its cyclical ways. And although disorder ends the book of changes, we know that it's a necessary pathway to renewal. So although we find this confusion before completion, that is the condition where imagination can thrive and create the next cycle that is inherently more of the same, but also up-leveling and expanding. It's like rather than a cycle, it's more like a spiral. You reach the end and you're spiraling outward to the next level of the cycle. You're not completing the same thing all over again. Disorder, I think, really increases energy and innovation. And that's like chaos theory. So in before completion, disorder or lack of security and ease can become quite pronounced, but given time, energy will dissipate and uncertainties will gel into a clear picture of the way forward. We can say anything that can go wrong will go wrong, but just as easily say that anything that can go right will go right. The Book of Changes is always teaching us that what we experience is a matter of perspective. The rules of the game that we can measure are what is observable in nature. Since disorder and uncertainty are its thrust into a purposeful future, trust that all is unfolding perfectly and the unexpected may still be on the horizon. Don't give up just yet. For a long time, you have sought the end of confusion and the dawn of new clarity. This is your higher purpose, and the way to accomplish this task is to lead yourself out of confusion first. The world is a reflection of your state of mind and understandings. All outer change begins inside you. Oppositional forces stand no chance against those who are secure in their inner purpose. Step forward knowing that everything required for this mission is within you. Everything is possible if you wait for the right moment. And that really makes, you can probably hear the happiness in my voice. I'm not as sad about the enigmatic confusion anymore if I can recognize the enigmatic, puzzling confusion place of time being this imaginal cell-filled goo, being this ever-expanding universe, being this place where we're at the end and starting a new beginning. So of course it's confusing. And just knowing that we're channeling that ever-expanding creation, that ever-expanding universe through our bodies, through our purpose, through our resolve, through our intentions. And this is a great week to really lean into that energy and feel the endless possibilities that are truly out there amidst all of our binary and linear thought patterns. So as I turn 41, I am continuing to trust the mystery and leaning into that even more. Funnily enough, over the past year or two, creating both the Astrosomatic Substack and those offerings and the Cycles of Time podcast were downloads of information that came in the middle of the night as these ideas that woke me up at like 3 a.m. and were like, this is what you should do, and this is what it's going to be called. And then I couldn't really get it out of my head. And in my younger days, when I was called by an idea like this or had something that came through that's like, you need to do this, I would usually wake up and try to ration it out, like make lists of pros and cons, make sense of it, kind of do a, cost analysis and see like how much time it would take. And then most of the time I would throw a lot of ideas out because they weren't realistic. But as I've gotten older and learned some of the language of my Virgo-ness and of Gate 64 as well, I've kind of leaned into trusting the mystery a little bit more and leaned into these big downloads and not having to figure them out and figure out the why and the how of something that comes to me as much. Occasionally I still drive myself crazy with figuring it all out, where there's like a pressure where it's like, it has to be now, we have to know now. But most of the time I'm starting to really just trust a lot more and use my imagination a lot more. And that really brings me back to childhood, where imagination was like front and center, as I see with my 5-year-old all the time. It's a beautiful power. It's like the raw power we have in all of us. And it's not always easy to explain or to justify to myself or to others. And sometimes it does feel a little bit lonely to have this gate so prominently, because it's just like so like in the ether and a little bit abstract and deep and philosophical. But like, it's not always easy to just like connect in with somebody else on that. But I've learned that like the more I allow myself to be in flow, the more my life feels just better when I give myself permission to be the type of Virgo that is based on this infinite potential and imagination and service to the greater whole, instead of leaning into the figuring out qualities and being more exacting and tidy and nitpicking. Because I think they're two sides of the same coin, right? The reason why Virgos might be seen as so analytical and breaking everything apart is because there is a deep understanding of the whole within it. And so that's the Pisces Virgo axis, is being within the everythingness and the wholeness, and then breaking it down into its parts. And I think that's what brought me to the I Ching, is just knowing that at the end of the day, it is everything is everything. But all of these 64 pieces that it can be brought into are just beautiful reflections and contemplations for everything that makes up that greater whole. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for coming on this crazy ride with me as I learn more about myself and others and the world through writing and talking to you. On my 40th birthday last year, I wrote an article about 40 feeling like a total rebirth, and I'll link to that article. It's called The Goddess in the Stars and Peaches for Everyone. And that rebirth really came through as a download last year of like, oh yeah, the number 40 has such magic. And it reminded me that 40 weeks is the duration of a human pregnancy. So the time from conception to the time of birth, the 3 trimesters in the womb. And then 40 days is the approximate amount of time after giving birth that it takes for the wall of the womb to heal in the place where the placenta had been attached. The placenta being this organ that we grow to feed a baby in utero. So 40 days is how long it takes to heal. And a lot of cultures, women after giving birth stay in kind of bed rest and are served upon by the community during those 40 days after birth. So I was like, okay, 40 weeks, 40 days. And then 40 months is 3.33 years. And that's always been my favorite number, 333. So that just for some reason, since I was little, it's just been that number. And when I look at 3.3 years old, 40 months old, children are in this kind of babbling stage where they have this great leap into blossoming of imagination and communication and vocabulary, and they're just exploding with possibilities and the desire to connect their rich inner worlds with the world around them. So all of these things that I was contemplating on my 40th birthday as this new beginning of a new chapter of life, a rebirth, really feels extra poignant this year as well. 41 is a little less of a round number, I guess, but it's now making me feel that if 40 was my rebirth, then 41, I'm a 1-year-old. I'm a wizened 1-year-old. And at this point, being 1, I am putting my imagination to use as much as I can. So yeah, again, thank you so much for being here and indulging me in being able to learn through speaking this project. In human design, they have different types, and I am what's known as a self-projected projector, which is someone who learns a lot about themselves through speaking and listening to what they say. So here I am doing that, and it really has just been so meaningful for me. And I hope that some of you out there are picking up some nuggets of how to live these weeks on a week-by-week basis, or learning more about your own gates that are activated by the sun, moon, and planets. And I am very soon, I keep saying this, but I'm very soon going to release my offerings of Cycles of Time readings, where we will dive deep into your sun gate as well as your moon and rising gate through the lens of the gene keys in human design, the I Ching, and astrology, and this whole wheel in a little deep dive way, because it's been so helpful for me. And I want to spread the love. So stay tuned for that very soon, I promise. Before that, I decided not to launch it right away because I'm heading up to Oregon for my birthday and to see my 98-year-old grandmother and go to my cousin's wedding and also get a good dose of the Pacific Ocean at my family's old beach cabin. So I'm really excited for that. And the next couple episodes might be a bit shorter. You'll probably like that, but because I'll be on the road. But I hope that you have a gorgeous new moon and a beautiful week ahead, soaking up all that mystery, letting your imaginal cells and gravity and time do the work. So please consider sharing, subscribing, and commenting. If you want to give me a little birthday present, a little hello or a share of this would be so welcome. All of your engagement helps me extend this work to more people, and I truly do love hearing from you whenever I do. So thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week. Have a beautiful new moon. All my love.